Welcome to the Unaffiliated Creatives Podcast, a show where independent artists can learn from other independent artists. My name is kaeveryday, and each week I will be speaking with some of the most creative minds in the indie music space, trying to figure out what they have learned while navigating through the music industry without the support of major record labels. This podcast is brought to you by the good people over at King Neppy Studios and powered by Red Weasel Media. Thanks for tuning in to the Unaffiliated Creators Podcast. I'm your host, kaeveryday. This is the indie artist safe place, so take off your shoes, get comfortable, and stay a while. Do us a favor and please rate the show. And if you have any feedback for us, please email us at unaffiliatedcreatives@gmail.com. The snippet you heard playing, there wasn't no snippet playing because he is not a music artist. He is a music lawyer. Sorry for that. Anyway, now that everybody has taken off their shoes and gotten comfortable, Ashton, what you been up to?
Busy, man. Working a lot, helping artists out, helping businesses in the music industry out. And it's been fun. It's been a fun journey.
All right, I like that. So I will say that you're actually the first music lawyer that I've ever had on the podcast. So we making history today. I don't have the little sound making machine where I can make the noise, but I just make it with my mouth. Do, do, do. All right, so let me start off by asking you this. So take us all the way back to the beginning. So when you was growing up, did you always want to be a lawyer?
Well, actually, first let me start by saying thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here. I've been following along with your podcast and I really enjoy it. I'm a fan. So thank you first and foremost for having me on. And to answer that question, no, I actually got asked that a lot as a kid. My father's an attorney, so constantly would be like, oh, are you going to follow in your father's footsteps and become a lawyer? And I was like, no way. My parents came from immigrant parents. And so they had hard work instilled in them and their core values, and they passed that down to their children. So by the time I was 12 years old, my father told me that if I didn't have a job lined up for the summer, I was coming to work for him at the law firm. And it was really hard to convince people to hire a 12-year-old. So my legal career began. And, as a 12-year-old millennial, spending summer days indoors, working at the time what I thought was really boring stuff was, not something that inspired me. And I would get asked a lot at the firm too, oh, you're so much like your father. You're going to become a lawyer. And I was like, no, I think I had to figure that out for myself. So I finished college and I got a job at a different firm that wasn't my father's to get another perspective. And I was working on some really interesting cases. I was doing toxic tort law, Aaron Brockovich type stuff. And I found that to be really rewarding work. I felt like I was fighting the good fight. And it just gave me a different perspective. And I really realized the impact and the positive impact that lawyers can have. And, it is a very important profession. And that was ultimately why I decided to go.
All right. So let me ask you this question. If you had to stop being a lawyer for whatever reason, what would you replace it with?
Retirement and travel, probably. I have a lot of hobbies, so I'd probably work out more than I do now. I would play sports, probably go back to coaching soccer, basketball, and make music. I do that a little bit on the side as well. So I definitely have more time to do that. I certainly would not have a hard time finding things to do with my free time. I have a lot of hobbies.
All right, that was a great answer. So I see that you have Esquire at the end of your name. So talk to us about how that happened and what exactly does that mean?
Sure. So ESQ, I usually put at the end of my formal signature, like on my email or court submissions, because that's required. But it simply just designates that I'm an attorney in the same way that a doctor uses MD at the end of their name. Sometimes it feels a little pretentious, but I paid a lot of money for those 3 letters, still paying for it. And a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into that degree. So, I have to remind myself to be proud of it.
So you just said something interesting. So you said that it's not an option. So when you submit paperwork and documents, you have to put that at the end of your name?
Yeah, typically, when you're filing something with the court, that designates that you are in fact an attorney, and then they'll also ask for your bar ID number, which proves that you're certified in the state that you're filing something in. So just sort of formalities.
Okay, I learned something new today. All right, so take a few minutes to talk to us about the time that you worked at radio stations in Philly and New York.
Sure. I was in college, and I actually interned for this company called Millennium Radio, and they own 3 radio stations. So, I did some work in the office, but I was at the bottom of the totem pole as an intern. So most of it was out in the field, going to events all over the tri-state area, setting up the equipment, breaking it down. I went out into the crowds and I mingled. I gave out swag and promoted the radio station. Overall, it was a really good experience. I got to go to a lot of really cool events, meet people. I met like barely famous people, but I did get to go to Rihanna's first performance in the US. It was at Tom's River Fest in 2006, which was a little music festival that the radio station sponsored. So that was probably the highlight.
I mean, that's not a bad highlight.
Yeah, no, not at all.
And you got to witness history.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let me ask you this question. Let me see, where is it? You got me so sidetracked on all the fun stuff you was doing with the radio station. I got sidetracked for a minute. Oh, here you go. So what are some reasons why music artists would want to hire a music lawyer besides just signing a record contract?
That's a really good question, and I'm glad that you asked it because it's important. I get a lot of artists that say that they don't feel they're they don't feel that they're at the point yet where they need a lawyer. They're not signing any big label deals, or they're not really involved in big contracts like that. But I would actually argue that an artist should engage with an attorney at the very beginning. In my opinion, I'd say even before a manager, to be honest, because you want somebody reviewing that manager-artist contract. But in order to build yourself as a successful artist and a successful brand and business, you need to be thinking about the legal risks and strategy and have that be like the center of every decision you make. Because if you don't, that's where you really open yourself up to big risk and pitfalls that could be career ending. So by working with an attorney in the beginning, you're planning for those things. You're making the appropriate decisions, whether it be the way that you form your business in an entity, if it's an LLC or a partnership or a sole proprietor, and even just the day-to-day dealings. As artists, your entire business is transactional. So that's contracts. And a lot of artists don't put contracts in place, and then that becomes an issue down the line. So anything from just singer-songwriter agreements, producer agreements, split sheets, performance agreements, venue agreements, et cetera, the list goes on. And then importantly is, the product essentially is, the artist's likeness, but also the intellectual property, the songs, the music, and you want to make sure that you're protecting that intellectual property. So I'll give you an example of something as basic as choosing your artist name, which is right at the beginning. If you don't consult with an attorney and you choose a name that's already been trademarked unbeknownst to the artist, and then they spend 5 years building themselves up as that artist, investing money into that brand, marketing, and get hit with a lawsuit 5 years later after investing thousands of dollars into that. Not only are you risking what you've already invested, but you're risking damages for the infringement, which also includes, it can include all the profits you've made, but it also includes paying not only attorney fees for you, but also the other side. So there are some significant financial penalties in using a name that's already been trademarked. And that can go anywhere from tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases millions of dollars. So those are career-ending mistakes right there. And if you had just met with an attorney for a $200 consultation fee, they could have ran extensive searches over various databases that we have access to, and at least provide assurances that the name that you're going to go with is one that is legally permissible. So yeah, I think that it's just important to close out on that, to consult with an attorney from the beginning. And even though, these are fees, you have to realize the importance of the information that you're going to be receiving and how much money that could save you down the line.
Hey, I never claimed to be a mathematician, but $200 sounds a lot better than hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I appreciate you taking time to break that down to us. But speaking of business, can you tell us why you decided to start your own business named Sound Logic LLC in June of 2022?
Sure. I always knew that I wanted to align my career with my passion for music long before I even knew I wanted to be a lawyer. And that's why I sought out roles at radio stations, and I was at a couple of media companies as well. So having a glimpse into that world through these experiences, and also through friends I had that were pursuing music. I play music as well on my free time and DJ'd a little bit in college. So I certainly had a taste of the world. It's just too common that artists get taken advantage of and exploited. And for me, fundamental core values of mine are equity and fairness. And I think that's why ultimately I became a lawyer. My father's a lawyer. There's a lot of lawyers in my family. And fortunately, we've always, in my family, fought on the right side of justice. And I think those are principles that are really strong and core to who we are as people, and certainly me. So when I see stuff like that and injustices taking place, I can't just sit idly by. I have to do something about it. I know I was reluctant to go to law school at first, but I think that doing that was really the necessary tool that I needed in order to make a positive impact and to be able to go into court and fight these battles on behalf of artists. So I guess it was just I became a lawyer, and there was this voice that I kept hearing telling me to do this, and the ideas just kept coming to me as to how I would build out the business. And even the name, I was just driving one day and it popped in my head. This was before I even left Bloomberg. This is what I'll name it, So I think it was a calling. I think it's my calling. And when I finally left my last role and got the courage to take that leap, I think things have really been aligning for me because this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
I like that. So explain this to me. So how did you go from managing a team of data scientists, engineers, and attorneys all the way to being a music lawyer?
I think that was the nature of working at Bloomberg. It is a really dynamic organization, and there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of different ways that you can take your career, and it sort of played out that way. I've always been a bit of a nerd with a knack for technology, and I'm a very quick learner. So the role kind of fell into my lap because I was able to speak two languages, essentially. I was able to read and understand coding and even learn to write code a little bit in that role, and also the law. And I effectively became a translator for the data scientists and the engineers and the lawyers, teaching the data scientists and engineers legal principles, and then the lawyers who were reviewing the output of the engineers, some of that coding language, and sort of interpreting it for them so that they could understand what their role was in the overall project, which was creating machine learning models, algorithms that were doing basic level legal research.
All right. So I got another question here for you. So I also saw that you are a certified fraud examiner. Can you take a couple of minutes to explain exactly what that is or what that means?
Absolutely. That is another certification, professional certification. that is noting someone as a specialist in the prevention, detection, and deterrence of fraud. In order to get that certification, you have to sit for a 5-day exam, and it covers topics such as financial transactions and fraud schemes, the law, forensic accounting, fraud deterrence and prevention. I worked at the Massachusetts Attorney General's office through an externship in law school where I was investigating fraud. And then also at Bloomberg for a bit, I was doing fraud investigations. So I was encouraged to get that certification. And honestly, it's been really helpful with what I'm doing now. As you can imagine, and not surprisingly, there's quite a bit of fraud in the music industry. You've got the classic manager stealing funds from the artist, or the label or distributor not paying the artist the appropriate amount of royalties that requires an audit. So that skill set has really come in handy. I have already, handled a couple of fraud cases in my 1 year of practice. And I think having that certification really distinguishes me from some other music lawyers that are doing this.
Yeah, it's a lot of scams out here, so definitely having a background in that definitely helps. So let me ask you this question. So you've held several career positions throughout your work history. With that being said, which one was your favorite and explain why?
This one, Sound Logic. For me, it's very rewarding. I get to help artists and be involved in the scene, and I love music. So it's just been a great experience. And also getting to build something from scratch is exciting, and doing it my way and having a vision and watching it come to fruition. And also my clients, we're all building businesses together. So it's been a fun experience, and getting to motivate my clients and they motivate me, and watching their progress feels like my success as well. So everything about it has just been really rewarding, and I love what I do now.
I like that. Starting from the ground up, there's definitely a feeling that you can't really, put a price tag on. So let me ask you this question. So like I said early on in the podcast, you're the first music lawyer that I've ever had on the podcast. And I normally ask this question to the different independent artists that I bring on the show, but I wanted to hear from the other side. So do you feel the music artists should stay independent, or should they sign with a major record label at some point?
That's a really good question. And I got to give you the cliche lawyer answer here and say it depends. I won't leave you with just that. But I think it depends on a number of factors. Like, what are the artist's goals and objectives? What is the artist's skill set and their personality, and which label is seeking them? Because that's got to be a good fit as well. And then also, of course, the terms of the offer and whether it's a good offer. I don't think that label deals are always bad. In fact, I'm proud to have negotiated some favorable label deals on behalf of artists. But I think the important points to stress when signing with a label are that, well, one, an artist should never sign that contract without having an attorney review it. Absolutely, first and foremost. Two is leverage. You want to go into those negotiations with leverage so that you can walk away with a better deal. And to do that, you need to first start off with a quality product. So hone your craft, work on the quality of your music and really refine the catalog. You want to build your fan base so that you're coming in with numbers. So start making waves in your community, have success in selling out local shows, then move to regional shows, and then nationwide. If you come to the table with some sold out shows across the country, you're having a much different discussions with the label. So brand recognition is very valuable. And then the other thing I would say is keep the term as short as possible. 2 years, 3 tops. I wouldn't do anything more than that. If you arrive at the negotiating table with a good lawyer, with leverage, good music, sold out shows, that's a totally different offer from the label than you would have otherwise gotten. On the flip side, if you've built yourself up to that point where you're selling out shows, and maybe you're the type of person that really likes your freedom, maybe independence is the way to go, because if you're already at that point making money, living within your means. There are a lot of artists that think, why go to a label at this point? I'm able to pay my bills. I'm doing it my way. Because when you sign with a label, you're going to sacrifice the freedom that you would otherwise have as an independent artist. So really, I think it comes down to personal preference. And like I said, your personality. I think the advantage that the label is going to offer you is the platform that they can put you on, the level of access that you'll have, in radio plays and exposure. But I advise my clients that whichever route they go, they have to be prepared to hustle. Once your foot's in the door at the label, I think a lot of artists think that means they've made it. They've already made it, and that's automatic stardom, but that's not how it works. You got to go in there, and I use an analogy for my clients, like think of it like a video game, like you're one of the Super Mario Brothers or Sonic the Hedgehog. Go in there, collect all the coins. You want to meet as many people as possible, make those connections, foster those relationships. So that way, when you're leaving that deal, if you decide not to stay with the label at the end of your term, you're at least leaving with clout and momentum to keep that success going. The artists that go in there and think, they've made it and the label's now just going to put them on, and then they don't work and they don't show their worth, those are usually the ones that get shelved. So regardless of which way you go, you're going to have to work hard. And I think that's the bottom line.
I appreciate you taking the time to actually break that blueprint down. Because like you said, I think some artists don't really understand all of the stuff that it really requires to make a real educated decision. So I definitely appreciate you taking the time to break that all down to us. Let me ask you this question. Without giving me the company's name, because we want to protect the innocent, what's the craziest thing that you've ever seen in a music contract so far?
So it's hard to even think of just one example, because I will say that since moving into music, it's just been jaw-dropping at some of the contracts I see out there and how predatory they are. I have not seen that and I've worked in a lot of other areas. They're pretty bad. And I think for me, the most egregious thing is just hearing from the artist what they were told in the negotiations, and then versus what the contract actually says. So I learned right in the beginning that I have to go into my meetings with my clients and ask them, what is your understanding of this deal? Because they are told something totally different than what's in the papers. And then I break it down for them that is not exactly what they're about to sign. And they'll say, no, but that's not what they told me. No, it's fine. They told me this. And whatever they told you does not matter. The writing trumps. So if what they told you is not in that contract, it means nothing. And then the other thing I think that has been a little bit eye-opening to me is just sort of the necessary complexity of bigger labels contracts. And that's by design. They just make it confusing on purpose. It's confusing for lawyers. So that's why I don't even think, I would never recommend any artist sign that paperwork without having a lawyer review it. But even so, lawyers can still miss things. You need a lawyer that is highly detail oriented and also that works as a music lawyer, because not every skill set is the same. And it takes a certain type of skill set to really review these contracts with a fine tooth comb and know what you're looking for, know what you can push back on and ask for the artist. So there's plenty of good music lawyers out there. I would just recommend that artists really seek out a music attorney and one that they like and go that route. Trying to think if I had anything else to say on that. Yeah, I think contracts, they really are an art form. That is why lawyers go to a lot of schooling and rigorous examination to do what they do. One simple word or even a comma can change the meaning of an entire contract provision or clause. So, that's all I can say. The contracts I've seen are tricky. They have a lot of little hooks in a clause that might bring in a totally different part of the contract or negate an entire other section of the contract. So if you're really not reviewing these things carefully, they can sneak some stuff in there. And that's why the big labels have a lot of great lawyers that they pay a lot of money to. That is by design.
You said something very key there, and it's actually kind of scary for artists out there. So you basically said that there's contracts that even lawyers might not even understand everything that it's saying. So if a lawyer don't have a chance to understand some of the stuff, you know these artists aren't going to understand what it's saying. So that's kind of eye opening.
It can be confusing for attorneys, and that's why I say really try to get someone that is an entertainment lawyer or a music lawyer, preferably, because I've worked with artists that used like a family law attorney or something just because they knew the person, and it's like they're doing an entirely different practice every day of their life. So to come into this, and I'm not saying that this lawyer missed anything, but it just opens up the risk a little bit. If they're not used to seeing this, I think that you're going to get better representation if you use someone who's working in the industry and seeing these contracts on a day-to-day basis and knows what to look for and knows some of the tricks of the trade.
All right, so the premise of this podcast is normally it's independent artists learning from other independent artists. And I know that you're not an artist, you're actually a music lawyer. But with that being said, are there still any mistakes that you could have made in your career so far that other people could learn from?
Yeah, so I always look at mistakes as just opportunities to learn, and then try not to make the same one again. So I'm glad you asked this question when you did, because it actually gives a personal example of the advice I was giving just before. My first job in private practice, I was interviewing. There were a few rounds of interviews, and they were making all these really great promises to me and making the culture sound, great. And it was like a family there, and they just painted it in rose-colored glasses, and I got really excited, and I signed with this firm, and then none of those things were true. Some of them were outright lies. And I didn't really have a lot of recourse because it wasn't written in my offer letter. So verbal promises, unless they are written, mean nothing. And I learned that in my very first job after law school, after my clerkship, actually. And so take my advice, learn from my mistakes even, and make sure that if someone is selling you something verbally, that is written in writing, or it doesn't mean anything.
So basically, what you're saying is you can't go off of the handshake deals. You got to go to the pen and ink to the paper, huh?
Yeah, I mean, there are ways that you can fight for things that were promised to you. I mean, there's certain legal arguments that can be made. It's just that is a much harder case. That's going to be a much more expensive legal fees, because you have to, in order to prove that, it is much, much harder, and it's going to be a lot of he said, she said. So yeah, just get it in writing.
All right. So let me ask you this. Is there something that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you for whatever reason? Or is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to take a few minutes and talk about before we get off this podcast?
Sure. Yes. But we talked about the importance of, the different things lawyers can help you with. The other thing I wanted to make sure is very clear is, that artists should get their music copywritten. I meet too many artists that have catalogs of really, really good music, and they never actually filed for the copyright registration on their music. And so by doing that, you're legally protecting your music. Without that, you're opening yourself up to some big risk. And for example, if somebody steals your music and you don't have the copyright registration, you can't actually sue them for infringement without that legal copyright registration. So it is very important to get that done. And if you do it after the infringement and then go and sue them, you are lessening the damages that you're entitled to. If you had the copyright registration prior to the infringement, you'd be entitled to get your counsel fees paid, and a much larger pool of damages. Without that, you're lessening your what you can receive financially, and by the time you pay your lawyer versus then what you recover might not be worth it. And at that point too, if the cat's out of the bag, somebody might have already taken your track as their own, and now that's become a huge hit and you're getting no credit for it. So very, very important. And especially, sync deals are some of the most lucrative deals in the industry, and without the copyright registration, you can't get your music placed into sync. So always take care of that. And then the other thing I think that I'm trying to do out here is a bit of a paradigm shift. I think that people use a lawyer, excuse me, when they really need it. And instead of using a lawyer for reactive reasons, I think it's important to seek out a lawyer for proactive legal services. You want to get ahead of these things. You want to plan for these things so that you have control over your career trajectory and you're not reacting to, emergency situations. And it's a much more pleasant relationship with your lawyer when you're planning and you're excited and you're working towards your goals, as opposed to coming to a lawyer frantic, stressed out, in an emergency type situation that could end your career. So I think in the same way that we look at healthcare, and you have your preventative healthcare, you go and you do your physical once a year, you have your dentist cleaning once a year, and that prevents a lot of really terrible things that could be missed if you weren't doing that, or like a root canal, by not getting your cleanings done, which are much more expensive and much more painful. Same thing with legal services. Proactive legal services are, invaluable to artists. And so I know a lot of firms are doing it. My firm as well. We have a membership service that you can utilize these proactive legal services. What's nice about it is that you get access to great legal counsel at discounted rates. You can get access to our membership perks and our broad network, and you're just more in control of your career. You can plan for and budget for legal expenses, as opposed to when they come and you're not anticipating them. And generally in those reactive situations, they are much, much more expensive. So this is a flat fee every month. You know what it is. You can plan for it. And also there's financial incentive. It's tax deductible legal services for your business. So there's tax incentives as well for utilizing proactive legal services.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to break all that down. So before you get out of here, can you take a few minutes to tell the audience where they can find you online?
Absolutely. You can find us on our website, soundlogic.legal. And from there, there's redirects to our social media accounts as well. But on IG, we're sound_logic_. Follow us for tips and advice and content. I just finally got around to putting together some educational content. So that'll be coming in the coming weeks for artists. And I'd love to get in touch and connect with some of your fan base as well. And hopefully stay in touch with you, maybe send you some more artists for your podcast. That'd be great. Symbiotic relationship here.
Hey, if it works for you, it works for me, man. At the end of the day, man, hey, it's enough. We can all win, right? But again, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast. It was very insightful. I know a lot of artists, when they tune into the podcast, they're going to learn something from this episode. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. And I'll be talking to you soon.
Hey, thank you very much, man.
All right, you have a good day.
It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.